Paul Kagame's vision for Rwanda as a superpower. Emerging out of the horrific spasm of the genocide that claimed of the minority Tutsi ethnic group in 1994, Rwanda has chalked up some spectacular economic performance. Its rate of economic growth is among the fastest-growing economy in East Africa, with an average of 8% since 2001. Poverty rates have been halved, and Rwanda is one of the very few African countries that was able to achieve the United Nations Millennium Development Goals. It also has the highest representation of women in parliament, with percentage of 63.8%. The Rwanda nation is a shining example of the term from grass to grace. Between the years 2010 and 2011 alone, the Rwandan GDP reached a record 8.2%, and the poverty rate dropped by a mind-blowing 57%, pulling over 1 million Rwandans out of poverty. Other indicators of human development, like life expectancy, infant mortality, employment, and literacy, have significantly improved. We cannot talk much about the glory of the Great Rwanda without mentioning the knight in shining armor President Paul Kagame, for it was thanks to his political brilliance and visionary leadership that became the final push this nation needed to archive his glory. Born an ethnic Tutsi in 1957, the young Paul Kagame was nearly killed in 1959 along with his parents in a brutal attack. Fleeing for their lives, the Kagame family relocated to neighboring Uganda, where Paul would grow up to join the Ugandan Army. In 1990, the Army sent Kagame to the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College. However, upon hearing rumors about an attack by Rwanda's Hutu-dominated army, Kagame left his military training to take command of the Rwandan Patriotic Front, or RPF, which at the time was an uninspiring and undisciplined Tutsi rebel group, which Kagame at the helm, the RPF developed into a deadly military force, which, inspired by its charismatic leader, fought several battles against the Rwandan army and gained control of significant territory. In April 1994, a plane carrying the young Rwandan president, Juvenal Habyarimana, an ethnic Hutu, was shot down by missiles. To this day, the exact perpetrators of his murder remain unclear, but it is this very incident that would set off the genocide, as all fingers pointed at the Kagame-led Tutsi rebel group. Branding the Tutsi rebel countrymen as cockroaches, the Hutu militants rampaged through Tutsi communities, committing all sort of atrocities like murder and rape, with no remorse or empathy, with an ultimate goal of complete ethnic cleansing. With the US and UN reluctant to intervene, it was up to Kagame's RPF to stop the bloodshed. Marching through roads littered with mass graves and mutilated Tutsis, the RPF went on the attack, successfully defeating the civilian and military groups responsible for the attacks and killings. They forced out many Hutu assailants from the region, allowing self-exiled Tutsis to return from the swamps and bushes where they had taken refuge. The RPF successfully stopped the genocide, but this was only the first part of their job, as there was still a risk of a second wave of violence, either by Tutsis motivated by revenge or by Hutus wanting to finish off the surviving Tutsis. Consequently, Kagame's first mandate was to promote national unity above all else, inviting both Hutus and Tutsis to play an active role in the development of the nation. He did not blame the Hutus for the genocide, but instead he pointed the finger at the legacy of ethnic rivalry instigated by the country's Belgian colonizers. The 6 years following the war were particularly difficult as country's economy struggled to grow. However, unlike the rest of his African counterparts, Kagame was hostile to the idea of taking development loans from the World Bank. He envisioned a self-sustaining economy driven by domestic value creation and international trade. After years of research, study, and travel, Kagame managed to develop the set of principles and policies that would fundamentally transform his nation's economy. Rwanda's success under Kagame can be narrowed down to 3 factors: embracing free market enterprise. At the time of the genocide, Rwanda had no private sector, as the government controlled virtually every part of the economy. However, this wasn't unique to Rwanda, as post-independence, most African countries adopted Soviet-inspired socialist economic models. Pioneers like Julius Nyerere of Tanzania, Modibo Keita of Mali, Leopold Senghor of Senegal, and Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana were all proponents of African socialism. A romantic which held that the continent's resources belonged to the people, and therefore it was the role of government and not individuals to oversee the creation and distribution of wealth. To achieve this utopian vision, the African founding fathers instituted various government's ministries to oversee almost every sector imaginable. I mean everything from education, healthcare, telecoms, technology, petroleum, labor, trade, housing, culture, information, transportation, and even sports. There was a minister for everything and anything. The practical result of this philosophy in Rwanda was a concentration of power in government bureaucracies, which naturally only attracted ambitious and power-hungry politicians. Under the tight grip of an inefficient, incompetent, and corrupt public sector, poverty, illiteracy, and poor health was the way of life for most Rwandans at the time of the 1994 genocide. Today, under the Kagame administration, however, the focus has been placed squarely on the private sector as the primary driver of the economy. The Rwandan government has really boosted its attractiveness. For foreign direct investment by investing in its infrastructure, maintaining a stable currency, investing in education, and marketing itself to the world as a politically low-risk investment destination. In 2008, the country also changed its language of education from French to English so as to better equip its labor force for doing business in the global marketplace. Often referred to as the country's CEO, Kagame has sought to build ties with global brands such as Google, Walmart, Chevron, as well as Arsenal Football Club. His efforts have yielded huge rewards, and under his watch Rwanda has seen consistent year-after-year increases in foreign direct investments. In the decades spanning 2007 to 2010, Rwandan FDI more than doubled, going from an estimated $800 million in 2007 to over $1.6 billion in 2017. This has had a huge impact on youth unemployment, as most of this investment has been poured into labor-intensive sectors such as mining, agriculture, tourism, and construction. The spirit of enterprise has seeped into every level of Rwandan society. The country has a large informal sector, mainly composed of market vendors dealing in locally sourced food products. The nation's capital, Kigali, is now home to a growing community of successful young entrepreneurs, produced and nurtured by its various tech hubs and business incubators. The government's drive to promote Rwanda as a global tourist destination has allowed many Rwandans to take up employment in the hospitality sector, treating visitors to the country's breathtaking scenery and wildlife. Another aspect of Rwanda's rise is cultural revolution. The Rwandan government has taken measures to stamp out corruption and tribalism, which was a distinct feature of the pre-genocide era. Putting up billboards with messages like investment yes, corruption no, and there is no space for corruption. The Kagame administration is known for its strong anti-corruption stance. Taking accountability to the grassroots, Kagame reintroduced a pre-colonial practice of imihigo, which in Rwandan tradition was a process whereby community leaders would declare their objectives to the tribal chiefs and tribesmen, who in response would pledge to support them and their chief in the goals. In its modern form, imihigo is an annual event where local mayors provide a statement of goals for the coming year along with a report showing the progress of the objectives of the previous year. As a result of this and several other anti-corruption initiatives, Rwanda now stands out from other African countries as a remarkable, honest place to do business. In Transparency International's 2017 Corruption Perception Index, Rwanda was ranked in the top 3 least corrupt countries in Africa alongside Botswana and Cape Verde, having a higher score than China, Italy, and even South Korea. The government's commitment to gender equality is more than just lip service. At 56%, Rwanda boasts of the highest rate of female parliamentary representation in the entire world. Putting things into perspective, female representation in the British Parliament stands at 32%, while in the United States legislature it's an appalling 19.5%. Kagame has also sought to integrate his personal discipline into the wider culture. His belief in order and cleanliness is reflected in his policies aimed at obliging Rwandans to keep the country neat and tidy. The streets in Kigali are now one of the cleanest on the continent. Kagame's message of reconciliation and his draconian approach to dealing with tribalism has helped forge unity between the Hutus and Tutsis. A Tutsi widow, when asked why she chose to forgive the militants who brutally hacked her husband to death, simply replied, "Because the president asked me to do so." And probably the most prominent reason so far for Rwanda's meteoric rise is targeted social welfare programs. The Rwandan government, despite its strong advocacy for capitalism and private investments, also understands the role of the public sector cannot be understated in promoting the economic well-being of its citizens. The government has implemented a range of social welfare programs, primarily aimed at the nation's poor. For example, through the Garinga program, the government provides cows to poor families living in rural areas. As these Rwandans tend to be subsistence farmers, these free cows bring major improvements to their living standards, serving as a source of milk for children and also as fertilizer for their crops. This tailored approach to welfare and wealth redistribution serves as an example to other African governments who have very often been guilty to applying Western solutions to African problems. Beyond improving the day-to-day well-being of its people, the Rwandan government has also rolled out policies to help achieve its long-term ambitions. In 2000, Kagame launched his Vision 2020 development program, which aimed to transform Rwanda into a knowledge-based, middle-income economy by 2020. To achieve this objective, the government dedicated a quarter of its annual budget towards education, raised compulsory schooling age from 9 to 12, and revised the schooling curriculum to ensure a stronger focus on fundamental linguistic and technical skills. Kagame's achievements have won him global recognition and accolades. He was called a visionary by former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, and Bill Clinton dubbed him one of the greatest leaders of our time. However, the man is not without his detractors. Kagame is regularly accused of favoritism, human rights violations, and repression of dissenting voices. He was also accused of foul play in his last two re-election successes. Firstly, in 2010 when he won by 93% of the vote, and more recently in 2017 when he won by, believe it or not, 99% of the vote. Following the enactment of a constitutional change which enabled him to run for an unprecedented third term. From a Western perspective, Rwanda's apparent democratic deficit under Kagame would be of serious concern. However, one must question whether the Eurocentric obsession with democracy is of any benefit to developing African nations with a deep history of monarchical rule. On a continent where most governments still struggle to fulfill basic functions, such as providing infrastructure, education, and security. Ideals such as freedom of speech and universal suffrage are surely nothing more than luxuries. Imperfect as he might be, Mr. Kagame's achievements in Rwanda place him head and shoulders above the vast majority of his contemporaries. There is clearly still a lot of work to do with Rwanda's GDP per capita currently at a mere $850 compared to a global average of $12,167. However, with consistency, persistence, and encouragement, we can expect Rwanda to grow leaps and bounds over the coming decades. Thanks for watching this video, and if you enjoyed it, please leave a like and also subscribe to our channel and become part of our family here at Think Rich Africa. See you another edition.